Good evening and welcome to Myths for Sleep. I'm James, and tonight we'll journey through ancient Greek mythology with the extraordinary tale of Zeus, king of the gods. Discover how a hidden child grew to overthrow the tyrant Kronos, defeat the mighty Titans, and establish a new age of divine justice. If this story guides you toward peaceful sleep, please like this video and let me know in the comments what mythological tale you'd like to hear next. Your support helps me create more soothing stories for your nights. Make yourself comfortable and let this epic of gods and destiny carry you into dreams. Long ago, when the world was young and the cosmos still trembled with the echoes of creation, there lived a titan named Kronos. He ruled over all existence with an iron fist, his power absolute and his fear even greater. For Kronos had received a prophecy, one that would haunt his every waking moment and poison his dreams with terror. The oracle had spoken in whispers that carried the weight of destiny. One of his own children would rise to overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his own father, Uranus. The wheel of fate, it seemed, was destined to turn once more. In his paranoia and desperation, Kronos made a decision that would echo through eternity. Each time his wife Rhea bore him a child, he would swallow the newborn whole, consuming his own flesh and blood to prevent the prophecy from coming to pass. One by one, the children disappeared into the darkness of their father's throat. Hestia, the gentle goddess of the hearth, was the first to be devoured. Then came Demeter, who would have brought abundance to the earth. Hera followed, destined to be queen of the gods. Hades, lord of the underworld, was swallowed next. And finally, Poseidon, future ruler of the seas, met the same terrible fate. With each child consumed, Rhea's heart broke a little more. She watched her husband's madness grow, saw how fear had transformed the once mighty ruler into a creature of paranoia and cruelty. The love she had once felt for Kronos withered like flowers in winter, replaced by a deep, burning determination. When Rhea felt the sixth child stirring within her womb, she knew that this time would be different. She could not bear to lose another child to her husband's insatiable hunger. As the time of birth approached, she made secret preparations, her plan as careful as it was desperate. On the island of Crete, hidden away from Kronos' watchful eyes, Rhea gave birth to her youngest son. The child emerged into the world with a cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of Mount Olympus. This was Zeus, and even as a newborn, there was something different about him. Something that spoke of greatness and power yet to come. But there was no time to marvel at the child's potential. Rhea knew that Kronos would soon demand to see his newest offspring. Working quickly, she wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes, making it appear as though it were the baby. The deception was simple but crucial, for upon this lie rested the fate of the entire cosmos. When Kronos arrived to claim his child, Rhea presented him with the bundle. Without hesitation, without even looking closely, the Titan King opened his mouth and swallowed what he believed to be his son. The stone passed down his throat, and Kronos felt the familiar satisfaction of having once again cheated fate. But far away, hidden in a cave on Mount Ida, the real Zeus lay sleeping. The cave was a sanctuary of peace and protection, where the gentle nymphs tended to the divine child. Adrasteia and Ida, daughters of Melicius, became his nurses, feeding him with honey and the milk of the goat Amalthea. This was no ordinary goat, but a creature of magic whose milk contained the essence of divinity itself. As Zeus grew, so did his power. Even as a child, he possessed strength that surpassed mortal understanding. The cave itself seemed to respond to his presence, its walls glowing with a soft golden light whenever he laughed or cried. To keep the child's existence secret from Kronos, the Curetes, young warriors devoted to Rhea, would dance and clash their shields whenever Zeus cried. Their loud songs and rhythmic dancing masked the sound of the infant's voice, ensuring that no word of his existence would reach his father's ears. Years passed in this hidden sanctuary. Zeus grew from infant to child, from child to youth, all while learning the ways of the world from his divine guardians. The nymphs taught him wisdom and compassion, while the Curetes instructed him in the arts of war and leadership. But perhaps his greatest teacher was solitude itself. In the quiet moments between lessons, when the cave was still and the only sound was the gentle dripping of water from the stalactites, Zeus would contemplate the nature of justice and power. He understood, even as a young god, that true strength came not from tyranny, but from the ability to inspire and protect. The goat Amalthea became more than just a source of nourishment. She was a companion and guide, and Zeus felt deep gratitude for her care. In time, he would transform one of her horns into the legendary cornucopia, the horn of plenty that would provide endless abundance to those who possessed it. As Zeus matured, he began to understand the true weight of his destiny. The nymphs would whisper to him of his father's cruelty, of his siblings trapped within Kronos' stomach, of the world that suffered under the Titan's rule. With each story, Zeus's resolve grew stronger, his sense of justice more acute. He learned that leadership was not about domination, but about service. A true king, he understood, must be willing to sacrifice for his people, to stand against tyranny, even when the cost is great. These lessons, learned in the quiet sanctuary of his hidden cave, would shape the god he would become. The young Zeus also discovered the power of patience. Though his divine strength grew with each passing day, though he longed to confront his father and free his siblings, he understood that timing was everything. The prophecy would be fulfilled, but it would be fulfilled in the proper way, at the proper time. In the depths of his cave, surrounded by the gentle sounds of dripping water and the soft breathing of his guardians, Zeus would often gaze up at the small opening that showed him the sky. Through that narrow window, he could see the stars wheeling overhead, the same stars that had witnessed his birth and would one day witness his rise to power. And in those quiet moments, as the world above continued its slow dance between day and night, Zeus prepared himself for the destiny that awaited him. The hidden prince was growing into a king, and soon, very soon, the time would come for him to step into the light and claim his birthright. The time of hiding was drawing to a close. Zeus had grown into a powerful young god, his strength rivaling that of the Titans themselves. His eyes, once the innocent blue of a child, now held the depth of storm clouds, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of thunder itself. Rhea, his mother, had been waiting for this moment. She had watched from afar as her son grew in wisdom and power, and she knew that the time had come for him to learn the full truth of his heritage. With careful steps, she made her way to the cave on Mount Ida, her heart heavy with both hope and sorrow. When mother and son were finally reunited, the cave itself seemed to hold its breath. Rhea looked upon Zeus with eyes that held years of suppressed grief, while Zeus saw in his mother's face the pain of every child she had lost. No words were needed at first, for the bond between them transcended language. "My son," Rhea whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft echo of the cave. "The time has come for you to know your true purpose." She told him everything. How Kronos had devoured his siblings one by one, how she had saved Zeus through deception, how the stone still rested in his father's stomach alongside the imprisoned gods. With each revelation, Zeus's expression grew more somber, more determined. "Your brothers and sisters still live," Rhea continued, "trapped within your father's body, waiting for someone to free them. That someone is you, my son. You are the child of prophecy, the one destined to overthrow the tyrant and restore justice to the world." Zeus listened in silence, his young mind processing the enormity of his destiny. The responsibility was overwhelming, but so was the injustice of his siblings' imprisonment. In that moment, he understood that his comfortable isolation was ending, and his true life was about to begin. "But how?" Zeus asked, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. "How does one make a titan regurgitate what he has swallowed?" Rhea smiled, and for the first time in years, it was a smile of hope rather than sorrow. "There is a way," she said, "but it will require cunning as much as strength." She told him of Metis, the titaness of wisdom and deep thought. Metis possessed knowledge of herbs and potions that could affect even the mightiest of the titans. If Zeus could gain her aid, she could prepare a potion that would force Kronos to vomit up everything he had consumed. "But Metis serves your father," Rhea warned. "You must convince her to betray her king, to risk everything for the sake of justice." Zeus nodded solemnly. He understood that this would be his first true test as a leader. He would need to inspire loyalty, not through fear, as his father did, but through the power of righteousness and the promise of a better world. The journey to find Metis would take Zeus far from the safety of his cave. As he prepared to leave, he took one last look at the sanctuary that had been his world for so many years. The nymphs who had raised him wept gentle tears, knowing that their beloved charge was leaving them forever. Amalthea, the goat who had nourished him, nuzzled against his hand one final time. Zeus stroked her head tenderly, promising that he would never forget her kindness. In his heart, he carried the warmth of her care, the wisdom of the nymphs, and the protective love of his mother. As Zeus emerged from the cave into the full light of day, he felt the sun's rays strike his face for the first time without the filter of stone and shadow. The world spread out before him, vast and beautiful and full of both promise and peril. He was no longer the hidden prince, but a god stepping into his destiny. The search for Metis led Zeus across landscapes he had never seen. He traveled through forests where the trees whispered ancient secrets, across rivers that sang with the voices of nymphs, and over mountains that touched the very heavens. Each step took him further from the innocent world of his childhood, and closer to the complex realities of divine politics. Finally, he found Metis in a grove of olive trees, their silver leaves catching the light like fragments of wisdom itself. She was beautiful in the way that only a Titaness could be, with eyes that held the depth of all knowledge, and a presence that spoke of ancient power. When Zeus approached, Metis looked up from the pool where she had been gazing into the depths of future possibilities. "So," she said, her voice like the whisper of leaves in an evening breeze, "the Hidden One reveals himself at last." "You know who I am," Zeus said, and it was not a question. "I know many things," Metis replied. "I know that you are the son of Kronos and Rhea, raised in secret on the island of Crete. I know that you have come to ask for my help in freeing your siblings. And I know that you believe yourself to be the child of prophecy." Zeus stood straighter, drawing upon the lessons in leadership he had learned from the Cretes. "I am all of these things," he said. "But I am also something more. I am someone who believes that power should serve justice, not the other way around." Metis studied him carefully, her wise eyes seeming to peer into his very soul. "Your father rules through fear," she said. "He devours his children to prevent his own downfall. What makes you different? What assurance do I have that you will not become the same kind of tyrant?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Zeus felt the weight of it, understood that his answer would determine not just whether Metis would help him, but what kind of ruler he would become. "I cannot give you assurance," Zeus admitted. "Power has a way of corrupting even the most well-intentioned. But I can promise you this: I will surround myself with counselors who are not afraid to speak truth to power. I will listen to wisdom, even when it challenges my own desires. And I will remember that a king's greatest duty is to serve his people, not to be served by them." Metis nodded slowly, and Zeus saw something shift in her expression. "There is wisdom in your words," she said. "And more importantly, there is sincerity. Very well, young god. I will help you, but not just because I believe in your cause. I will help you because I believe in you." Together, they began to plan. Metis would prepare the potion that would force Kronos to regurgitate his children, but Zeus would need to find a way to administer it without arousing suspicion. The plan they devised was as elegant as it was dangerous. The plan was both simple and perilous. Zeus would present himself to his father not as the prophesied child who would overthrow him, but as a young god seeking service in the court of the great Kronos. The disguise would be maintained through careful deception and the natural arrogance of a titan who believed himself invincible. Metis worked through the night, her skilled hands grinding herbs and mixing potions with the precision of someone who understood the very essence of transformation. The potion she created was colorless and odorless, designed to dissolve completely in wine without leaving any trace of its presence. One sip would be enough to undo years of Kronos' careful consumption. Remember, Metis warned as she handed Zeus the small vial. The potion will work, but what happens afterward depends entirely on you. Your siblings will emerge weak and disoriented. They will need time to recover their strength, and Kronos will not remain incapacitated for long. Zeus nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility he carried. This was not just about freeing his siblings, but about timing the liberation perfectly so that they could all escape before Kronos recovered. The journey to his father's palace took Zeus through realms he had only heard about in whispered stories. As he drew closer to the seat of Titan power, the very air seemed to grow heavier, charged with the oppressive energy of absolute authority. The palace itself was a monument to ego, its towering spires reaching toward the heavens as if to challenge the very cosmos. When Zeus finally stood before the great gates, he felt a moment of profound uncertainty. This was the place where his siblings had been born, where they had taken their first breaths before being consumed by their father's paranoia. The irony was not lost on him that he was returning to complete a circle that had begun with such tragedy. The guards at the gate were massive beings, their eyes glowing with the cold light of eternal vigilance. When Zeus announced himself as a minor god seeking audience with the great Kronos, they looked him up and down with the bored indifference of those who had seen countless petitioners come and go. "State your business," one of them growled, his voice like grinding stone. "I come to offer my service to the Lord of all creation," Zeus replied, pitching his voice to sound young and eager. "I am skilled in the arts of war and governance, and I would be honored to serve at his table." The gods exchanged glances, then one of them shrugged. "Another one seeking glory," he muttered. "Very well. You may enter, but know that Lord Kronos suffers no fools. Disappoint him, and you will regret it for eternity." As Zeus passed through the gates, he felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. The palace was filled with minor gods, titans, and other divine beings, all vying for position in Kronos' court. The atmosphere was thick with ambition and fear, a toxic combination that Zeus found deeply unsettling. The great hall where Kronos held court was a testament to both power and paranoia. The ceiling soared impossibly high, supported by pillars carved from single blocks of marble. At the far end of the hall, on a throne that seemed to be carved from the very foundations of the earth, sat Kronos himself. Zeus's first sight of his father was a shock. The Titan King was massive, his form radiating power that made the air itself tremble. But there was something hollow about his eyes, something that spoke of a mind consumed by fear and suspicion. This was not the confident ruler Zeus had expected, but a being slowly being devoured by his own paranoia. When Zeus's turn came to approach the throne, he felt his heart hammering against his ribs. One wrong word, one moment of recognition, and everything would be lost. But as he knelt before his father, he saw only the dismissive glance of a king who had grown bored with the endless parade of supplicants. "Another young god seeking glory," Kronos rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "Tell me, boy, what makes you think you are worthy of serving in my court?" Zeus had prepared for this moment, crafting his response to appeal to his father's ego while concealing his true identity. "Great Lord," he said, keeping his voice steady, "I offer not just my strength, but my loyalty. I have heard tales of your wisdom and power, and I wish to learn from the greatest of all rulers." Kronos seemed pleased by the flattery. "Wisdom, yes," he mused. "I have learned that power must be protected, that threats must be eliminated before they can take root. Are you prepared to serve such wisdom, young god?" "I am, my lord," Zeus replied, bowing his head lower to hide the disgust he felt at his father's words. And so Zeus was accepted into his father's court, assigned to serve as a cupbearer at the royal table. It was a position of seeming insignificance, but it was perfect for his purposes. As cupbearer, he would have access to Kronos' wine, and with it, the opportunity to administer Metis' potion. For several days, Zeus served faithfully, learning the rhythms of the court and waiting for the perfect moment. He watched as his father held audiences, dispensed justice with an iron fist, and reveled in the fear he inspired in his subjects. Each day strengthened Zeus's resolve to see this tyranny ended. The moment came during a great feast, when Kronos was in high spirits and the wine was flowing freely. Zeus had been watching his father's drinking patterns, noting when he was most relaxed and least suspicious. As the evening progressed and the revelry grew louder, Zeus saw his chance. With practiced ease, he poured wine into Kronos' golden chalice, the same vessel from which the Titan king had toasted his dominion over the cosmos. Into the dark liquid, Zeus let fall a single drop of Metis' potion. The wine swirled briefly, then settled, showing no sign of the transformation that was about to occur. "More wine, my lord?" Zeus asked, his voice betraying none of the tension he felt. Kronos reached for the chalice without looking, his attention focused on the entertainment before him. He lifted it to his lips and drank deeply, the wine disappearing down his throat in a series of powerful gulps. For a moment, nothing happened. The feast continued around them, the sounds of laughter and music filling the air. Zeus stood frozen, wondering if the potion had failed, if his one chance had been wasted. Then Kronos' expression changed. His eyes widened, and he pressed a hand to his stomach. A look of confusion crossed his face, followed by one of growing alarm. The great hall fell silent as everyone turned to look at their king. "What is happening to me?" Kronos gasped, his voice strained with pain and bewilderment. Before anyone could answer, the Titan king doubled over, his massive form convulsing. The sound that emerged from his throat was unlike anything the court had ever heard, a mixture of agony and something else, something that sounded almost like rebirth. And then it began. First came the stone, the same stone that Rhea had wrapped in swaddling clothes so many years ago. It emerged from Kronos' mouth and clattered to the floor, its surface still smooth despite its long imprisonment. Then came Poseidon, god of the seas, gasping and disoriented but alive. He was followed by Hades, lord of the underworld, his dark eyes immediately scanning the room for threats. Hera emerged next, her regal bearing intact despite her ordeal. Demeter followed, goddess of the harvest, her hands already glowing with the power of growing things. And finally came Hestia, oldest of the siblings, her gentle presence bringing a sense of calm to the chaotic scene. The court erupted in pandemonium. Some fled in terror, others stood frozen in shock, and a few began to realize what was happening. But Zeus had eyes only for his siblings, these gods and goddesses he had never met but had dreamed of freeing. "Brothers, sisters," he called out, his voice carrying across the hall. "I am Zeus, your youngest brother. The time of our father's tyranny is ended." The 5 gods turned toward him, their eyes wide with amazement and growing recognition. In that moment, despite the chaos around them, the family was finally united. The palace of Kronos became a battlefield in the span of a heartbeat. As the 6 siblings stood together for the first time in their existence, they faced the wrath of their father, who had recovered from his shock and was now rising to his full, terrifying height. The very air around Kronos crackled with rage, and his eyes burned with the fire of absolute fury. "Impossible," Kronos roared, his voice shaking the foundations of the palace. "I devoured you all. You cannot exist. This is some trick, some illusion." But Zeus stepped forward, no longer hiding his true nature. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of thunder itself. "No trick, Father. I am the child of prophecy, and these are your children, freed from their prison. Your reign of terror is over." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Around them, the remaining courtiers chose sides with the swift calculation of those who understood that neutrality was no longer an option. Some fled the palace entirely, while others drew closer to witness what would surely be a conflict of cosmic proportions. Kronos' response was swift and merciless. He raised his hand, and the very fabric of reality seemed to bend around him. "You dare challenge me, boy? I am the Lord of Time itself. I will unmake you from existence." But Zeus was ready. The years of training, the wisdom gained from his guardians, the power that had been growing within him since birth, all came together in this moment. He raised his own hand, and lightning crackled between his fingers. "Your time is over, Father. A new age begins now." The first clash between father and son sent shockwaves through the palace. Pillars cracked, walls trembled, and the very sky above began to darken with storm clouds. But Zeus was not fighting alone. His siblings, though weakened by their long imprisonment, rallied to his side. Poseidon summoned the power of the seas, causing the ground beneath the palace to shake as if massive waves were crashing against it. Hades called upon the shadows of the underworld, wrapping them around their father like chains. Hera lent her strength to Zeus, her power amplifying his own. Demeter caused the earth itself to rebel, roots and vines bursting through the marble floors. And Hestia, though her nature was gentle, provided the steady flame of courage that kept them all united. The battle was fierce but brief. Kronos, for all his power, was fighting not just his children, but the very concept of change itself. The wheel of fate, which he had tried so hard to stop, was finally turning. In the end, it was not just Zeus's lightning that defeated him, but the inexorable force of destiny. As Kronos fell, the palace began to crumble around them. The 6 siblings fled into the open air, where they found themselves facing a larger conflict. Word of their uprising had spread, and the other Titans were mobilizing for war. "This is only the beginning," Zeus said, his voice heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. "Our father's brothers will not accept this defeat. They will gather their forces and come for us. We must be ready." And so began the Titanomachy, the great war that would reshape the cosmos. The conflict was unlike anything the world had ever seen. On one side stood the Titans, led by the mighty Atlas, Prometheus, and Epimetheus, beings of immense power who had ruled since the dawn of time. On the other side stood the 6 children of Kronos, later to be known as the Olympians, fighting for a new vision of divine rule. The war raged for 10 long years. Mountains were shattered, seas boiled, and the very fabric of reality was torn and rewoven countless times. Zeus proved himself to be not just a powerful warrior, but a skilled leader, uniting his siblings and inspiring them to fight for something greater than themselves. In the early years of the war, the conflict seemed evenly matched. The Titans had experience and established power, while the Olympians had youth and the righteousness of their cause. But Zeus understood that victory would require more than just strength. It would require wisdom, strategy, and allies. It was Metis who suggested that Zeus seek out the imprisoned Cyclopes, the one-eyed giants who had been locked away in Tartarus by Kronos. These master craftsmen, she explained, could forge weapons that would tip the balance of the war. But reaching them would require a journey into the deepest, most dangerous realm of existence. Zeus did not hesitate. Leaving his siblings to continue the fight, he descended into Tartarus, that primordial pit of chaos and punishment. The journey was harrowing, taking him through realms of shadow and despair, where the very air seemed to whisper of ancient sorrows. When he finally found the Cyclopes, they were chained with bonds forged from the essence of eternity itself. Brontes, Steropes, and Argus looked up at him with eyes that held both hope and skepticism. These beings had been imprisoned for so long that they had almost forgotten what freedom felt like. "Great ones," Zeus said, his voice echoing in the depths of Tartarus. "I come to offer you liberation from your bonds. In return, I ask only for your aid in overthrowing the tyrant who imprisoned you." The eldest Cyclops, Brontes, studied Zeus with his single piercing eye. "Words are easy, young god," he rumbled. "Kronos made promises too, before he chained us here. Why should we trust you?" Zeus could have used his power to force their compliance, but instead he chose a different path. He told them his story, sharing his vision of a world where justice would prevail over tyranny, where the strong would protect the weak rather than exploit them. He spoke of the kind of rule he hoped to establish, one based on wisdom rather than fear. The Cyclopes listened, and in Zeus's words they heard something they had not heard in eons: sincerity. Here was a god who spoke not just of power, but of purpose. When he finished speaking, they exchanged glances, and then Brontes nodded slowly. "Very well," the Cyclops said. "Free us, and we will forge for you weapons of such power that even the mightiest Titans will tremble." Zeus shattered their chains with bolts of lightning, and the Cyclopes stood free for the first time in countless ages. True to their word, they immediately set to work. their skilled hands shaping the very essence of storm and sky into weapons of legendary power. For Zeus, they forged the thunderbolt, a weapon that could split mountains and command the very heavens. For Poseidon, they created the trident, capable of stirring the seas and shaking the earth. And for Hades, they crafted the helmet of invisibility, allowing him to move unseen through any realm. Armed with these divine weapons, the tide of war began to turn. But Zeus knew that even this might not be enough. The Titans were still formidable opponents, and the war had already lasted far too long. The world itself was beginning to suffer from the constant conflict. It was then that Zeus made another crucial decision. He would seek out the 100-handed ones, the Hecatonchires, who had also been imprisoned by Kronos. These giants, with their 50 heads and 100 arms each, possessed strength that was beyond mortal comprehension. The journey to find them was even more perilous than the descent to the Cyclopes. But Zeus persevered, driven by his vision of a better world and his responsibility to his siblings. When he finally found the three brothers, Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges, they were bound in chains even stronger than those that had held the Cyclopes. "Who dares disturb our eternal punishment?" Cottus growled, his 50 heads speaking in unison. Zeus stood before them without fear, his thunderbolt crackling with power. "I am Zeus, son of Kronos, and I come to offer you vengeance against the one who bound you." The name of Kronos stirred something ancient and terrible in the hearts of the Hecatonchires. Their 100 arms strained against their bonds, and their eyes burned with the fire of long-suppressed rage. "Free us," Briareus said, his voice like the rumble of avalanches, "and we will crush the Titans beneath our fists." Zeus broke their chains, and the three giants rose to their full height, each one as tall as a mountain. Their gratitude was profound, but their thirst for revenge was even greater. They had waited eons for this moment, and now it had finally come. The return to the battlefield marked the beginning of the end for the Titans. The Cyclops' weapons gave the Olympians power beyond anything they had possessed before, while the Hecatonchires brought raw strength that could not be matched. But perhaps most importantly, Zeus had shown that he was a leader who inspired loyalty through deed rather than fear. The final battle was apocalyptic in its scope. Zeus hurled thunderbolts that lit up the sky like a second sun, while Poseidon's trident stirred the seas into towering waves that crashed against the heavens themselves. Hades moved unseen through the battlefield, striking at the Titans when they least expected it. And the Hecatonchires hurled boulders the size of mountains, each throw capable of leveling entire cities. In the end, it was not just superior weapons that won the day, but superior cause. The Olympians fought not just for victory, but for a vision of justice that inspired them to heights of courage and sacrifice that the Titans could not match. When the dust finally settled, the old order had been swept away, and a new age was ready to dawn. The defeated Titans were cast down into Tartarus, that same prison where the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires had once been held. But Zeus showed mercy where his father had shown none. Those Titans who had not actively opposed him were allowed to retain their positions, and even some of those who had fought against him were eventually forgiven. As Zeus stood on the battlefield where so much had been decided, he felt the weight of victory settling upon his shoulders. The war was over, but now came the even greater challenge: ruling wisely and justly in a way that would honor the sacrifices that had been made. With the Titanomachy finally ended, the cosmos stood at a crossroads. The old order had been shattered, and the question now was what would take its place. Zeus, as the leader of the victorious Olympians, faced the monumental task of creating a new system of divine governance that would be both just and enduring. The first challenge was deciding how to divide the cosmos among the three brothers. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades had fought side by side, but now they needed to determine who would rule which realm. Rather than claiming dominion through force, as their father might have done, Zeus proposed that they draw lots to determine their domains. The three brothers stood on the peak of Mount Olympus, the highest mountain in the world, which Zeus had chosen as the new seat of divine power. The mountain itself seemed to approve of this choice, its peak piercing the clouds and reaching toward the heavens in a way that suggested it was meant to bridge the earthly and divine realms. 3 tokens were placed in a golden urn, each representing one of the 3 great realms of existence. Zeus drew first, and his token bore the symbol of the sky and heavens. Poseidon drew second, claiming dominion over the seas and all waters. Hades, drawing last, received the underworld and the realm of the dead. The earth and Mount Olympus, Zeus declared, shall be common to all 3 of us, places where we can meet and govern together when the need arises. This decision would prove to be one of Zeus's wisest. By ensuring that no single god held absolute power over every aspect of existence, he created a system of divine checks and balances that would prevent the kind of tyranny that had characterized his father's rule. But Zeus's wisdom extended beyond mere political arrangements. He understood that true leadership required more than just the ability to command. It required the wisdom to know when to listen. And so he began to gather around himself counselors and advisors whose wisdom would help him rule justly. Chief among these was Metis, whose intelligence and foresight had already proven invaluable. But Zeus's relationship with Metis was complicated by another prophecy, one that would test his character in ways he had not expected. The fates had revealed that any child born of Zeus and Metis would be greater than its father, just as Zeus had been greater than Kronos. The parallel to his own situation was impossible to ignore. Here was Zeus, faced with the same choice that had driven his father to such terrible acts. Would he follow the path of paranoia and destruction, or would he find a different way? The decision Zeus made would haunt him for eternity. Rather than kill Metis or their unborn child, he chose to swallow Metis whole, keeping her wisdom literally within himself. It was a solution that preserved life while preventing the prophecy from coming to pass. But it was also a choice that showed Zeus was not immune to the temptations of power. From this union, carried within Zeus's own body, would eventually spring Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare. She would emerge fully grown from Zeus's head, a symbol of how wisdom and power could be united in a single being. But the circumstances of her birth would always remind Zeus of the moral complexities that came with absolute power. As Zeus established his court on Mount Olympus, he made decisions that would shape the divine order for millennia to come. He appointed his sister Hera as his queen, recognizing her strength and regal bearing. Though their relationship would be turbulent, marked by Zeus's many infidelities and Hera's jealous rages, their union represented the joining of sky and earth, of masculine and feminine divine principle. Zeus also established the 12 great gods who would form the core of the Olympic pantheon. Besides himself, Hera, Poseidon, and Hades, there were others who earned their place through virtue and service. Apollo, god of music, poetry, and prophecy, brought beauty and inspiration to the world. Artemis, goddess of the hunt and the moon, represented the wild and untamed aspects of nature. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, reminded all beings of the power of attraction and desire. Ares, god of war, embodied the courage and fury of battle, while Hephaestus, god of the forge, represented the nobility of craftsmanship and hard work. Demeter, Zeus's sister, brought the gifts of agriculture and the harvest, ensuring that mortals would have sustenance. And Hermes, the messenger god, served as the link between the divine and mortal realms. Each god was given specific responsibilities and domains, creating a divine hierarchy that was both organized and flexible. Unlike his father's rigid tyranny, Zeus's system allowed for growth, change, and the recognition of merit. Gods could rise in status through their actions, and even mortals could, in exceptional circumstances, achieve divine status. But Zeus's greatest challenge was not in organizing the divine realm, but in establishing his relationship with humanity. The mortal world had suffered greatly during the war with the Titans, and Zeus felt a responsibility to help rebuild and protect human civilization. However, he also understood that mortals needed to maintain their independence and develop their own strength. The solution Zeus devised was elegant in its simplicity. He would not rule mortals directly, but would instead provide them with guidance, protection, and the occasional intervention when circumstances demanded it. He established the concept of divine justice, where the gods would punish those who violated the natural order and reward those who lived virtuous lives. This system was not without its flaws. Zeus himself would often struggle with the temptations of power, and his relationships with mortals would sometimes be marked by favoritism and personal desire. But the underlying principle, that divine power should serve justice rather than personal whim, represented a fundamental improvement over the arbitrary rule of the Titans. As Zeus settled into his role as king of the gods, he began to display the qualities that would define his reign. He was passionate and powerful, capable of terrible wrath when justice demanded it. But he was also capable of great mercy, and his love for both gods and mortals was genuine, even if it was sometimes complicated by his own desires. The early years of Zeus's reign were marked by a sense of optimism and renewal. The cosmos, which had been torn apart by war, began to heal under his guidance. New alliances were formed, old grudges were set aside, and the divine realm began to function as a true community rather than a collection of competing tyrants. But Zeus understood that his greatest test was yet to come. Creating a new order was one thing, but maintaining it would require constant vigilance and wisdom. The challenges that lay ahead would test not just his power, but his character, and would ultimately determine whether his vision of divine justice could endure. As he stood on the peak of Mount Olympus, looking out over the world that was now his responsibility, Zeus felt the weight of destiny settling upon his shoulders. The young god who had once hidden in a cave on Crete had become the ruler of the cosmos. But with great power came great responsibility, and Zeus was determined to prove himself worthy of the trust that had been placed in him. The age of Zeus had begun, and with it, a new chapter in the history of the divine realm. The honeymoon period of Zeus's reign was brief. As the initial euphoria of victory faded, the real work of governing began, and with it came challenges that tested Zeus's wisdom and character in ways he had never anticipated. The cosmos, it seemed, was not content to be ruled peacefully. One of the first great tests came from an unexpected quarter. Gaia, the ancient Earth Mother who had helped Zeus in his struggle against the Titans, began to grow resentful of the new order. She had expected that Zeus would be more like the old gods, more connected to the primal forces of nature. Instead, she found him creating laws and structures that seemed to constrain the wild, chaotic power she represented. In her anger, Gaia conceived and bore a new race of beings to challenge Zeus's authority. These were the giants, creatures of immense size and strength who were born from the blood of the defeated Titans. Unlike the Titans, who had at least been capable of reason and negotiation, the giants were driven by pure rage and a desire for destruction. The war against the giants, known as the Titanomachy, was different from the conflict with the Titans. Where the Titanomachy had been a war of ideologies, a struggle between old and new ways of thinking, the Titanomachy was a test of pure survival. The giants sought not to rule, but to destroy everything Zeus had built. Zeus found himself fighting not just for his throne, but for the very concept of civilization itself. The giants attacked with weapons forged from the bones of the earth, and their strength was such that they could hurl mountains as if they were pebbles. But Zeus had learned from his previous war. He did not try to face this threat alone. Working together with his fellow Olympians, Zeus devised a strategy that would use their combined strengths to maximum effect. Athena, who had by now emerged from Zeus's head as a fully grown goddess, provided tactical wisdom. Apollo and Artemis used their archery skills to strike from a distance. Hermes used his speed to coordinate the divine forces. But the key to victory came from an unexpected source. Zeus realized that the giants, for all their strength, were vulnerable to mortal weapons when wielded by heroes. And so he enlisted the aid of Heracles, the greatest of mortal heroes, whose strength rivaled that of the gods themselves. The sight of a mortal fighting alongside the gods was unprecedented, and it sent a powerful message about Zeus's vision of the cosmos. He did not see mortals as mere subjects to be ruled, but as potential partners in the great work of maintaining order and justice. This philosophy would become one of the defining characteristics of his reign. The defeat of the giants marked the end of the last great challenge to Zeus's authority from the forces of chaos. But it also marked the beginning of a new set of challenges, ones that were more personal and, in many ways, more difficult to navigate. Zeus's relationship with Hera, his wife and queen, became increasingly strained as his tendency toward infidelity became apparent. Unlike his father, who had been consumed by paranoia and fear, Zeus was driven by a different kind of excess, an insatiable appetite for love and beauty. He found himself drawn to mortal women, nymphs, and even other goddesses, despite the pain this caused his wife. Hera's jealousy was legendary, and her responses to Zeus's infidelities were often cruel and vindictive. She would pursue Zeus's lovers with relentless fury, transforming them into animals or visiting terrible punishments upon them. The children of these unions were often subjected to her wrath as well, forced to endure trials and hardships that would have broken lesser beings. Yet through it all, Zeus remained committed to Hera as his queen. Their relationship was tempestuous, marked by fierce arguments and passionate reconciliations. But it was also a partnership in the truest sense, as Hera's strength and wisdom complemented Zeus's own qualities as a ruler. One of the most significant challenges to their marriage came in the form of Prometheus, the Titan who had sided with Zeus during the war. Prometheus had always been a champion of humanity, and he believed that mortals deserved to have the gift of fire, which had been withheld from them by the gods. When Zeus refused to grant this gift, Prometheus took matters into his own hands. The theft of fire was more than just a crime. It was a direct challenge to Zeus's authority. Fire represented not just warmth and light, but knowledge and the power to shape the world. By giving it to mortals, Prometheus was essentially declaring that humans deserved to be treated as equals to the gods. Zeus's response was swift and terrible. He had Prometheus chained to a mountain in the Caucasus, where an eagle would come each day to tear out his liver, which would regenerate overnight only to be torn out again the next day. It was a punishment that would last for eternity, a reminder to all that defiance of the gods came with a terrible price. But Zeus's punishment of Prometheus revealed something troubling about his character. The young god who had once championed justice and mercy was beginning to show signs of the same paranoia that had consumed his father. The fear that mortals might become too powerful, too independent, was starting to influence his decisions. This internal struggle between Zeus's better nature and his darker impulses would define much of his reign. He was capable of great compassion, as shown by his protection of suppliants and his defense of the innocent. But he was also capable of terrible cruelty when he felt his authority was threatened. The story of Pandora illustrated this duality perfectly. In response to Prometheus's theft of fire, Zeus ordered Hephaestus to create the first woman, Pandora, as a punishment for humanity. She was given a jar containing all the evils of the world, which she was instructed to open among mortals. The resulting suffering was immense, as disease, war, and death spread throughout the human world. Yet even in this act of vengeance, Zeus showed a touch of mercy. At the bottom of Pandora's jar, he placed hope, ensuring that even in their darkest moments, mortals would have something to sustain them. It was a complex gift, one that showed both Zeus's capacity for cruelty and his underlying love for humanity. As the centuries passed, Zeus's reign settled into a pattern of cycles. There would be periods of peace and prosperity, when his better nature held sway and the cosmos functioned harmoniously. But these would be followed by times of conflict and strife, when Zeus's darker impulses or the actions of others would disrupt the divine order. Through it all, Zeus continued to learn and grow. Each challenge taught him something new about the nature of power and responsibility. He began to understand that true leadership was not about absolute control, but about finding the right balance between order and freedom, between justice and mercy. His relationship with his children became a source of both joy and concern. Each of his offspring inherited aspects of his power and personality, but they also developed their own unique characteristics and ambitions. Some, like Athena and Apollo, became trusted advisors and allies. Others, like Ares, were more troublesome, requiring careful management to prevent their destructive impulses from causing harm. The mortal heroes who were his children presented particular challenges. Figures like Heracles, Perseus, and Theseus possessed divine strength and courage, but they also had mortal limitations and emotions. Zeus found himself torn between his paternal love for these heroes and his responsibility to maintain the balance between divine and mortal realms. As Zeus reflected on his reign from the heights of Mount Olympus, he could see both his achievements and his failures. He had successfully established a new order based on justice rather than tyranny. He had protected the cosmos from the forces of chaos and destruction. But he had also learned that power, even when wielded with good intentions, could corrupt and distort. The great king of the gods was beginning to understand that his greatest enemy was not external threats, but the temptations and weaknesses within himself. The journey from hidden prince to cosmic ruler had taught him much, but there were still lessons to be learned. Time moved differently for the gods than it did for mortals. What seemed like an eternity to humans was merely a season in the life of Zeus. And as the millennia passed, the king of the gods began to understand the true nature of his role in the cosmic order. He was not just a ruler, but a guardian of the delicate balance that kept the universe from falling into chaos. The wisdom that Zeus gained through his experiences was hard-won. Each mistake, each moment of cruelty or weakness taught him something valuable about the nature of power and responsibility. He learned that true strength came not from the ability to dominate others, but from the capacity to inspire them to be their best selves. One of the most profound lessons came through his relationship with mortals. Initially, Zeus had seen humans as subjects to be protected and guided. But over time, he began to understand that they were something more precious. They were partners in the ongoing work of creation and civilization. The heroes who arose from the mortal world continually amazed Zeus with their courage and ingenuity. Though they lacked the immortality and raw power of the gods, they possessed something equally valuable: the ability to grow and change, to overcome their limitations through determination and virtue. In many ways, They reminded Zeus of his own journey from hidden child to cosmic ruler. Zeus's relationship with his fellow gods also evolved over time. The early years of his reign had been marked by a certain authoritarianism, a need to establish his authority and maintain order. But as the centuries passed, he began to rely more on collaboration and consensus, understanding that the best decisions came from the wisdom of many rather than the will of one. Even his troubled relationship with Hera found a kind of resolution. Their marriage would never be perfect, marked as it was by Zeus's infidelities and Hera's jealous rages. But they learned to work together despite their personal conflicts, recognizing that their partnership was essential to the stability of the divine realm. The children of Zeus became his greatest legacy. Each of them embodied different aspects of his personality and power, but they also developed their own unique gifts and perspectives. Athena combined wisdom with warfare, showing that true victory came from intelligence as much as strength. Apollo brought beauty and prophecy to the world, reminding all beings that life was about more than mere survival. Artemis protected the wild places and the innocent, demonstrating that power should be used to defend those who could not defend themselves. Hermes served as a bridge between different worlds, showing that communication and understanding were essential to maintaining peace. Even Ares, despite his love of conflict, taught valuable lessons about the importance of courage and the willingness to fight for what is right. The mortal heroes who were Zeus's children carried his legacy into the human world. Heracles, through his 12 labors, showed that even the greatest challenges could be overcome through persistence and virtue. Perseus demonstrated that evil could be defeated, but only through courage and cleverness. Theseus proved that true leadership meant putting the needs of others before one's own desires. As Zeus aged, he began to spend more time in contemplation, reflecting on the lessons of his long reign. He would often sit on the highest peak of Mount Olympus, looking out over the world he had helped to shape and consider the great questions of existence. What was the purpose of power? How could justice be balanced with mercy? What was the responsibility of the strong toward the weak? The answers he found were not simple or easy. Zeus came to understand that leadership was not about having all the answers, but about asking the right questions and being willing to learn from both success and failure. He learned that the greatest leaders were those who could admit their mistakes and work to correct them. One of the most important realizations was that power was not an end in itself, but a tool for serving others. The young god who had once been tempted by the intoxicating feeling of absolute authority had learned that true fulfillment came from using his abilities to protect and nurture the world around him. This understanding transformed his approach to rulership, making him more patient, more compassionate, and more willing to delegate authority to others. Zeus also came to appreciate the value of diversity and difference. The cosmos was not meant to be uniform or predictable, but vibrant and dynamic, full of different perspectives and approaches to life. His role was not to impose a single vision on the world, but to create the conditions where different beings could flourish and contribute their unique gifts. The relationship between order and chaos, which had once seemed like a simple opposition, revealed itself to be more complex. Zeus learned that some degree of chaos was necessary for growth and creativity, while too much order could lead to stagnation and death. The art of rulership lay in finding the right balance, allowing for change and development while maintaining the stability that civilization required. Perhaps most importantly, Zeus learned the value of hope. Even in the darkest moments of his reign, when war threatened to tear the cosmos apart, or when his own actions brought suffering to those he loved, there was always the possibility of redemption and renewal. This hope was not naive optimism, but a deep understanding that every ending was also a beginning, every failure an opportunity to learn and grow. The story of Zeus became more than just the tale of one god's rise to power. It became a testament to the possibility of transformation, the idea that even the mightiest beings could learn and change and become better versions of themselves. The hidden child who had grown up in a cave on Crete had become not just a ruler, but a symbol of the eternal human struggle to balance power with wisdom, strength with compassion. As the ages passed and new challenges arose, Zeus faced them with the accumulated wisdom of his long experience. He had learned that leadership was not about perfection, but about the willingness to keep trying, to keep learning, to keep growing. Each day brought new opportunities to serve, to protect, to inspire others to reach their full potential. The thunder that rolled across the sky became more than just a display of power. It became a reminder that even the mightiest forces of nature could be channeled toward protection and renewal. The lightning that once destroyed now brought life-giving rain to parched earth. The storms that had once terrified mortals now cleared the air and made way for new growth. In his later years, Zeus began to understand that his greatest achievement was not the defeat of the Titans or the establishment of his rule, but the creation of a world where justice and mercy could coexist. He had learned that true power lay not in the ability to control others, but in the capacity to inspire them to be their best selves. This was a lesson that extended far beyond the realm of the gods. The mortals who looked up at the sky and saw Zeus's eagles soaring overhead began to understand that they too had the potential for greatness. The farmer tending his fields, the merchant traveling distant roads, the mother caring for her children, all of them were part of the great tapestry of existence that Zeus had helped to weave. Each had their own role to play, their own contribution to make. Zeus's influence extended beyond the immediate present into the future itself. The principles he had established, the balance he had created between order and freedom, would continue to guide the cosmos long after his own time had passed. He had built not just a kingdom, but a legacy that would endure through the ages. The other gods, watching their king as he matured and grew in wisdom, began to understand their own roles more clearly. They were not just servants of Zeus, but partners in the great work of maintaining the cosmic order. Each of them had their own domain, their own responsibilities, their own opportunities to contribute to the greater good. Hera, despite their troubled relationship, had become Zeus's most valuable advisor in matters of governance and diplomacy. Her understanding of the complex relationships between different divine factions helped Zeus navigate the political challenges of ruling a diverse pantheon. Their marriage, while never perfect, had evolved into a partnership that strengthened them both. Poseidon, ruling the seas from his underwater palace, had learned to work in harmony with his brother, rather than in competition. The oceans that he controlled were not separate from the sky that Zeus ruled, but part of the same interconnected system. When storms arose, they worked together to ensure that the rain fell where it was needed most. Hades, in his realm of the dead, had perhaps the most difficult role of all. He was responsible for ensuring that the cycle of life and death continued to function properly, that souls found their proper rest, and that the boundary between life and death remained intact. His work was largely invisible to the living, but it was essential to the functioning of the entire cosmos. The relationship between the gods and mortals had evolved as well. No longer were humans seen as mere subjects to be ruled, but as partners in the ongoing work of creation. The heroes who arose from the mortal world were celebrated not just for their strength, but for their virtue and their contribution to the greater good. Zeus had learned that the greatest leaders were those who could inspire others to become leaders themselves. The young gods who joined the pantheon were not expected to simply follow orders, but to think for themselves and contribute their own unique perspectives. This approach created a more dynamic and resilient system of governance. The festivals and rituals that mortals held in honor of the gods became more than just acts of worship. They became celebrations of the values that Zeus had worked to establish: justice, mercy, courage, wisdom, and the importance of community. Through these observances, mortals reminded themselves of their own potential for greatness. As Zeus looked toward the future, he saw not an ending, but a continuation. The work of maintaining justice and order in the cosmos would never be finished, but would require constant attention and renewal. Each generation would face its own challenges and would need to find its own ways to uphold the principles he had established. The story of Zeus was ultimately a story of transformation and growth. The frightened child hidden in a cave had become a wise and compassionate ruler, not through the accumulation of power, but through the development of character. This transformation was not a one-time event, but an ongoing process that continued throughout his eternal life. In the quiet moments between the storms, when the sky was clear and the world was at peace, Zeus would remember the lessons of his long journey. He would think of his mother Rhea, who had saved him through her courage and sacrifice. He would remember the nymphs who had raised him with love and wisdom. He would honor the memory of those who had fought beside him and those who had opposed him, understanding that all of them had played a role in shaping who he had become. The greatest truth that Zeus discovered was that leadership was not about being perfect, but about being willing to learn from imperfection. Every mistake was an opportunity to grow, every failure a chance to begin again with greater wisdom. This understanding freed him from the paralyzing fear of failure that had consumed his father, and allowed him to take the risks necessary for true progress. And so the story of Zeus continued, not as a tale with a definitive ending, but as an ongoing narrative of growth and discovery. Each day brought new challenges and new opportunities to serve, to protect, to inspire. The thunder that rolled across the sky was not just a sound, but a promise that justice would endure, that mercy would prevail, and that the light of hope would never be extinguished. In the end, Zeus's greatest legacy was not the kingdom he had built or the power he had wielded, but the example he had set. He had shown that it was possible to be both strong and compassionate, both decisive and wise. He had demonstrated that true leadership came not from domination, but from service. And he had proved that even the mightiest beings could continue to learn and grow throughout their existence. The story of Zeus, king of the gods, lord of the sky, and protector of justice, was ultimately a story of hope. It was a reminder that no matter how dark the night might seem, dawn would always come. No matter how great the challenges might be, they could be overcome through courage, wisdom, and the willingness to work together for the greater good. And in the gentle rumble of distant thunder, in the flash of lightning that briefly illuminates the darkness, in the rain that brings life to the earth, the presence of Zeus could still be felt. Not as a distant and terrifying deity, but as a guardian and guide, watching over the world he had helped to create and continuing to learn from the endless miracle of existence itself. The hidden child had become the eternal king, and his story would continue for as long as the sky stretched above the earth and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. I hope this epic journey through Zeus's transformation from hidden child to wise ruler has brought you peace and serenity. May the thunder god's wisdom guide you toward deep, restorative sleep. If you've enjoyed this voyage through ancient Greek mythology, I invite you to subscribe to discover other tales that will soothe your nights to come. You can now let this video continue playing in the background. The relaxing music that follows will help you drift into even deeper slumber. Settle in comfortably and let your body surrender completely to rest. Just as Zeus watched over the cosmos from Mount Olympus, this gentle melody will watch over your peaceful sleep.